Hello and welcome back to another episode of the 2020 podcast, bringing clarity to business, entrepreneurship, and life. I'm your host, Dr. Harbir Sayan. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me, guys. As always, I'm truly grateful. I truly appreciate all the support, all the kind words, all the reviews. And on that note, I always ask one favor as we get started. Please do share this podcast if you find some value in any of the conversations we have. Take a screenshot, put it up on your Instagram story, hit like, leave a comment, do all the good stuff. I really appreciate it. And I know you're going to find value. Today's guest, I'm so excited, truly excited to have on. His name is Simon Robert, and he is an incredible, we're going to go into it. I'm just going to read you his bio because otherwise I'm going to go ramble off on all these different tangents that we end up doing when we talk, Simon. But Simon has had nearly 20 years of experience in corporate social responsibility, and he is now the Senior Director of Mission and Public Affairs and a member of the senior management of a little company you may have heard of named Essilor Canada. As such, he leads a deployment of group missions across all organizations' activities. He's responsible for professional and academic relations. He develops strategic partnerships that contribute to the achievement of Essilor's ambition to eradicate poor vision within a generation. He also acts as the executive director of the Essilor Vision Foundation. That's a lot of stuff. And on top of that, the stuff that's really brought Simon, I mean, in addition to this already glamorous resume, the stuff that's really brought Simon on the podcast is how much we've just connected on all these different levels, all these different conversations that we have, Simon. I'm so excited to get into all of that stuff, to get into all the stuff you're doing at Essilor, all the social responsibility stuff. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I have to confess, I am a big fan. I've listened, I've shared, and I've liked, and all the other reactions we can get.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. I appreciate it. That's part of the reason why the podcast is growing, is amazing people like you. So thank you. Okay. So let me get into a little bit about what exactly all the other stuff I'm talking about that's kind of brought you on the podcast. So people who listen or follow me on social media, they know I'm into philosophy, specifically Stoic philosophy, talking about Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, the, ancient philosophers, and, in our current time, Ryan Holiday, who's kind of transformed all of those things for us. And that's the type of stuff we really connected on, right? Every time we talk, we get into those philosophical conversations and how Stoicism has led us to where we are and helped us grow. I really want to start with that. We're going to get into the conversations that I think are going to directly, actionably help our, colleagues in our industry. But this is the type of stuff I think will also help, and mindset type of stuff. So tell me your kind of view of Stoicism. Tell me how you use it on a daily basis, or philosophy, and how it helps guide you kind of day to day.
Well, maybe I can start with the full disclosure. I'm not an optometrist. So if you have any questions in that regard, so that's fair enough. I do have a technical degree in engineering technologies. And then when I went to university, I applied for East Asian Studies, philosophy, and I ended up doing psychosociology. So you're going to see those trends. And then I went to postgraduate diploma in sustainability doesn't exist. So it was environmental management, but that psychosociology aspect of things kept with me in there. And I did some martial arts as well, and Aikido. So that was another element where I was really fascinated about how does this all work? And I remember one of my class in psychosociology, we were dissecting stories. And one of them was, in English, it's a Little Red Riding Hood, right? And all of those elements and why it was written the way it was written and all of those. So I always kept fascination with philosophy and the way people think, like Sophie's World and other classical books that explain different philosophies. And looking at different things. And at one point I've discovered the obstacle is the way, right? So which is one of the first book from Ryan Holiday, the author we're both following. It was this great speaker. The guy developed social plastic. Basically, he hires people in developing countries to pick plastic trash in the sea. And what he realizes, if he pays them for the plastic, because he's taking the plastic, putting them in pellets and selling that plastic with a social aspect to it, right? It's a pretty good aspect, and they're really making great progress there. So in a social responsibility conference, and that guy was an amazing speaker, and he kept referring to that book. So honestly, I'm a bookworm, and we're going to discuss many of them today, I think. And that's how I came to learn about Ryan Holiday, and he's the one that introduced me to Stoicism.
Ah, okay, that's awesome.
And I think the aspect of it is really and I saw you. I bought one of his, and I kept it close for the podcast. It's nice. You can see it here. It's maybe with the lighting. Memento Mori. You know, I think we all live pretty stressful lives. You know, always asking different questions, and I like that principle of Memento Mori, because it just reminds you that, you know, life is fragile. We're stressing about many different things. You know, always defending one aspect, trying to make sure that everything is okay. And then, you know, only one life to live. What's really important behind it. And when I read through Stoic philosophy, I think that's what comes up. You know, when you look at Seneca and the fact that, you know, one of them was wearing a purple robe back then because he knew that his ego was in the way. So, and purple was not a good color back then, you know, it wasn't accepted. So he wore that to challenge himself, to say, is that truly important to me? And I think in the world like we live in today, you need to ask yourself those questions to really get a sense of why am I, even before Simon Sinek and start with whys, why am I doing this? Why do I need the brightest car or $8,000 watch or something else? I'm creating these needs that, do I really need them? And I think that's a trend in society right now. It's really fascinating. And Stoic philosophy really, I think, represents that.
It absolutely does. I think you're right in that there do seem to be more people kind of waking up to this thought process and asking these types of questions. You know, and there's people like Ryan Holiday and others out there who are helping, and Simon Sinek, who actually was going to be the next person I was going to ask you about. But it's becoming more of a common conversation for people to be more aware, self-aware, aware of their surroundings and aware of the conversations they're having. And I think that's really important. It's really helpful for us to be better. So Simon Sinek. So, okay, let me go take a second here. I wish I could show, if you were watching or whatever, I wish I could show you guys. So I was talking to Simon before we did this, right, over the last few days, like, hey, what topic should we talk about? Let me put a little outline together. And he sent me this list. And apparently this is not even an exhaustive list of all these books and topics. And basically, you know, of all these concepts that he has in mind that he wants to talk about, and he's amazing at talking about. These are the types of things we talk. I wish I could show you. There's how many on here? So there's gonna be like 15 or 20 books on here. Yeah. That's amazing. It's awesome. I wish we could touch on all of them. I think we will touch at a high level. We'll pretty much touch on most of these topics, but the introduction, and you broke it down into the different segments too, introduction and the next segment, and the introductory segment was these two things we're talking about. One was Stoicism, and the other was Start with Why from Simon Sinek. And I think that is, I mean, the title says Start with Why. I think that's the perfect place to start. Mm-hmm. You know, if you can tell me in your own words, like why it's important to start with why, and then, you know, how can we, somebody who hasn't thought about it this way yet, how can we start to think that way? How do we reframe our thinking to start mm-hmm. with why versus the how or the what?
And I'll go towards what we do in life, right? I could tell you that I work for Essilor, which is a lens manufacturer, and we do this and that product, and those are the technical aspects of it, and we're really, really good, right? And that's what we've sometimes been doing, right? And you can do the same thing, saying like, here's what I do in my exams, and you can go in greater details about the technical aspects of it, the new instruments, the Optos that you just bought, or this other contact lens equipment that you purchase. So, and you're really, you love that. So you start talking about those. That's not your why specifically. And people might be interested, but is that really why they're coming? They're coming so you can improve their lives, right? And that's what I really liked about Essilor, and what drove me to it is that they phrased a mission that made sense to me. It was improving lives by improving sight. That's not a marketing statement. It's really in the bylaws, the mission is that. So the reason it being is it. And I think every individuals need to do it. And I found mine. I think it's on my Instagram, which is I don't have your Instagram, so you don't have to go on mine. It's a really personal one. But I wrote like trying to build a better world and things, right? Because I built my home, I built many things, so I work with my hands. And I think building a better world is something that made sense to me.
Hang on.
And
did you actually build your own home with your own hands?
yeah.
Did you actually?
Yeah.
Holy
I can do
cow.
pretty much anything of those. Yeah.
That's incredible. That's like, people will just say that, oh yeah, like I built my house. Like they were involved in like, the design aspects of it. But you
No,
physically
I
were
didn't
involved
do
in actually.
I didn't do the framing, all the flooring, painting, electricity, lighting, part of the plumbing.
Crazy.
Yeah, all of that stuff we did. So it's actually, I built my first one. I was 23 years old. So
Wow.
yeah, some
Okay.
cool stuff.
Amazing. Like every time I talk to you, man, I told you this earlier. Every time I talk to you, there's something. That's awesome, dude. Okay, please go on.
Yeah. No, and I think that's where the why, we were talking about optometry and selling before.
Yeah.
And I think that's an element of it. If you position yourself, and you mention selling is a negative word.
Mm.
It's been overused. We all think of the movie Carl Salesperson with the weird jacket that doesn't fit and all of that in the car lot. That's what we see when we say selling. And I think, it's really about finding a solution to improve someone's life. And you have a host of solutions available to you. It's just they don't know. So is it really selling, or is it more like explaining the options of what's available and then helping them to make a wise choice? And some people might say, potato, Simon, it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. It is the same thing, right? In the end, the way you're going to explain it is very similar, but the why behind it is going to make you feel good about how you're doing it and why you're doing it, and you're going to feel great. I used to, when I was studying, I sold clothes, right? And as a student, I was trying to find a job. I didn't want to pay for my suits, so I worked in a clothing store, and I got amazing rebates and all of that. And one of the things I did is I never sold anything. Really, I didn't push any sales, or I just waited for the patient that really needed my help. The patient, see, I'm biased now. For the client that was needing my help, and then I went and we tried to find something that works with them, never pressuring for high amounts or anything. And, my numbers were the greatest in the store back then. And the others were pushing and trying to convince them that they needed more clothes and other elements that never worked. Mm. And I think the helping others, that's a why that always wins.
So how would I reframe that in my mind? Like somebody asked me, hey, what do you do? I'm an optometrist. I do eye exams. Maybe I help people see better, but like, how would I look at it? So I really am reframing what I'm doing and starting with like the why. What kind of a why? I don't know if I'm asking the right question here, but what kind of a why do you think somebody should be starting with? He does the bullseye thing, right? He's got the bullseye, the why in the middle, and then he's got so what's that central thought? So the central thought is, my why is I want to improve people's lives. My why is I want to help people see better. What can you make a suggestion as to like what some of those whys might be?
And you're right in asking what some of those whys, because we're full of them, right? And right now we're focusing on the work why. That makes that, but you can have a broader one. So just doing this podcast, It's not necessary for your practice to do a podcast, but you're doing it because it's part of your broader why, which is, and you might want to frame that one as well. And that one is part an overall, and that makes your whole being in the end, right? And from an office perspective, it's really about helping them improve themselves. How can you be the best version of yourself? And yes, after that, you need to make decisions because you can't fix everything on everyone, right? So you're in eye care. That's good. You can do that element. What I love about the field now in the industry is that you can improve someone's life instantaneously. When you correct refractive error right away, social impact, boom, I'm a better person. I see better. It improves my quality of life. And I think that is just amazing. And you mentioned it in my bio. I work for Loto Quebec. It's a gambling organization, right? And we needed to be very, very careful to stay in the lane where people had fun, because when you stop having fun and you spend too much, that's problem gambling, right? Mm-hmm. But demonstrating the social aspect of that and the whys behind it was sometimes tricky. Mm-hmm. But I always kept my North Star to say, I want to help people. They need to have fun. And it needs to improve their life as well. That's always the way, because we made them dream. How can we make them dream of a better world? And you don't necessarily need millions to lead a rich life. And I think that was a message we were trying to purvey to people. But again, for a practice, it's what I would suggest. Is I'm going to say read the book or go listen to 18 minutes. What was that in 2011 or 2009? I think it's been that long that he did his first sort of TEDx about it, that he spoke about the why. So 18 minutes, you can find it, Simon Sinek, and have that discussion with your team. You'd be surprised their why and what it is, and that your whys are sometimes complementary. That's what makes a team. And just having that overall discussion, do it with your spouse to say, like, do you have a why? Like, we never ask those questions. And that's what gets people connected, and that's the idea of my role within Essilor. And I always tell people, I'm not in sales. Like, I can direct you to my colleagues which do that. But that is not what I do. I try to create those relations so that we can help more people. That's what we do.
Yeah.
Right.
I want to go back to that bio you talked about, but the part with within Essilor here, you're responsible for professional and academic relations. You develop strategic partnerships that contribute to the overall, the goal of Essilor here to eradicate. I want to talk about the developing partnerships side of it, because you're an amazing guy to talk to. And, when I finally met you, well, actually, technically it was the second time we met in person just a couple of weeks ago. The first time was last year at the BCDO, and then again this year. But this year we got to actually chat. But I see you kind of walking through, chatting, and it's like natural. I don't even know if you knew everybody you were talking to, but it seemed pretty normal and natural to you to walk through a crowd and have a conversation with whoever happened to come across your path. So you're confident and comfortable in that position. But how do you approach partnerships? How do you approach, when somebody knows that you work for Essilor, and so you probably have a direction that you're trying to go.
Yeah.
How do you approach that when somebody knows who you are and where you're coming from, and yet you still are able to develop the partnerships and have the conversations in a natural, genuine way?
So you mentioned I was confident. I would nuance that I'm interested. I love meeting new people and finding their story. So if you see me walking around and meeting new people, I'm going to ask many questions. If I know I'm going to meet you, I'm going to do my research first. And I love doing that and finding out and kind of reading those people for what they do. And then when it comes to Essilor and partnerships, I find connection points where we align. There's always going to be disagreement, and we can talk about it, and we can go over Essilor buying clearly and other elements that have been, on everyone's mind in this. And I think, yeah, we can. Oh, okay, it's done, right? It's done. It's there. Some people don't want to work with us because of that. I mean, at some point, I can't do anything about it. What I can do is start to work with the people that do want to work with us, and that's how I'm working. If people say I don't want to work with you, okay, can we still what do you do? Like, okay, it's good, it's interesting. Are you involved socially? Like, do you make a difference? And you're a great example. You're not one of our customers. You're involved locally. You just did a volunteer work again recently. That's all fascinating. So if I can learn from those people and what they're doing to help more people, that's, for me, it's job done, right? We did what we, and if it's too bad for Essilor. So it goes pretty fast. When you do it that way, you're interested, animated, good discussion, meeting that person, discovering it. It's good. You're a qualified partner that we could do something together, or you're a maybe. So let's keep in touch. We can do it. And then there are others where like, oh my God, let's start something. We can do something cool. I'm like, okay. And the fun part is I can do these things, and I have the whole organization that wants to do it. If you ask an employee, what's our mission? They're going to say improving lives by improving sight. We're one of the biggest employee-owned business. We're all shareholders of Essilor. So it's a big element of the culture for us. So it makes it easier. I rarely have no when I come back to the office and have crazy ideas about new project or business models, or trying to do new models in upper north of Canada for First Nation communities. And, we explore different elements in this, and I mix. Sometimes there's like, okay, it's a business partner, so it's supposed to be a business deal, but there's also some low income people that won't be able to afford products and don't have coverage in that province. So what do we do? Can we do a mix of these things? So it's all about thinking outside the box and not in a linear fashion. So that's why I apologize to your listeners, because sometimes I go crazy on different topics. But that's what makes it happen from a project standpoint, and how I can create those relations. Some of them are just friendly. We won't do anything. Others, it just goes naturally, and we can develop cool projects.
I don't think, well, if there's somebody who's been listening regularly, I don't think they'll mind, because they know that I just go on tangents all the time. Anyways, that's pretty cool that you and I like that the distinction you made is the interest. Like you have the confidence, but you actually enter with having interest in the other person. That, I mean, it seems kind of like an obvious thing, but it's not so obvious, right? Because there was actually a quote that I just saw again. I had taken a photo of something. Most people listen with the intent to reply, not the intent to understand. I think that's actually really an important part. It sounds like what you're doing. And the other thing that I took away from what you're saying there is another Stoic sort of philosophy. Actually, I think it was just one of the last couple of days in that daily Stoic book, the One for All for One. It's all about the greater good ultimately. And I think that's the type of perspective I try to have as well, is like, okay, if I know that this thing that I'm doing is going to help the greater, community as a whole, then it's worth having that conversation or doing that little thing or going out of my way a little bit. And then you can talk about
the key to all of this is being authentic as well, right? If I was only doing a public relations show, it wouldn't work. It's all about building that trust. And when I say, let's change the world together, let's make a difference, and I'll bring what I can to this. And when we do projects, that's what I say. What do you need? Glasses? And I've told you that. Yeah. What do you need? Glasses for that project? Do you need instruments that we can lend you for the project? Volunteers? I mean, we can. I don't have those resources. Let me turn around and find someone else who does to make this happen. So it's not all about, and that's the difference in good social responsibility initiatives. It's not about the organization. It's about the impact you can generate. And when you think about projects that way, people tend to gather around it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. That I think is like maybe part of that. Sometimes you see people or you see organizations, they seem to have this sort of invisible magnetic sort of thing going on. People seem to be drawn to it, and often you can't put your finger on it, but the authenticity is key. It's part of that sort of magic formula for sure. So we've danced around the corporate social responsibility a little bit. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you do in terms of CSR, what you think is good corporate social responsibility, what's not good social responsibility? I think you touched on it a little bit already.
Um, it's a huge topic. I've been highly involved in the government of Quebec has actually a law on sustainable development, and which every governmental corporation needs to abide by different principles, like 16 principles, and it can be really complicated, a lot of elements. To simplify the whole thing, really, sustainable development is about how do I align economic, social, and environmental factors and make that work in my organization. Simple as that. For optometry office, it would mean, okay, less paper. That's kind of okay, but it's not the main initiative, and your environmental impact is not major in regards to this. It's really how do you leverage creating positive social impact even more. And we've built a one pager for a sales team to talk to ECPs about that, to say like, hey, just do a good job. You're already helping people. You're in a field where that's what you do. It's amazing. You want to do more? Hey, it might even be good for business. If you do good publicity about eye health like you're doing, that's an amazing asset to you. So it's great. If you want to volunteer, even better. If you do all of those, and your why could be, as an entrepreneur, you're providing jobs to a lot of people. That could be your only why, and it would be fine. But when you wrap all of this together, there's kind of a sense of pride to say, hey, I'm doing all of these things and it's working. But should I feel bad that I'm making money out of it? Well, no, that's the whole point of sustainable development. Is sometimes we say, oh, the social part is sometimes forgotten or the environmental one is weaker. No, we never talk about the financial aspect, that it's okay to be profitable in this. That's how it works. It doesn't mean you're stealing from anyone. It just means that you're helping the people that do have resources to pay for your product and services. It's okay. Yeah. So you're helping people improve their lives. You're making money out of it. Environmental aspect, you're not, it's not major. You can always improve on small things in the office. You can also ask one of your employees to say, like, could you be our environmental champion and, find out things that we can provide. There's always a greener employee in your staff that you can leverage to do these things. That's great for motivations as well. So that's, and we can go into, because I went internationally to speak at conferences on sustainable development and those aspects in big corporation like Essilor. When we talk about supply chain, a global supply chain like ours, shipping, greenhouse gas emissions and all of those elements. But honestly, for most ECPs, it really comes down to this, and how can I help people work? And you can do it through your association as well.
Yeah.
I mean, just volunteering for your association is giving time. It's volunteering.
So I think when I think of social responsibility, I think of I guess you're right. The types of things you're talking about, environmental impact and things like that. But what about giving back, to those in need? Like, so, there's opportunities to potentially go volunteer or provide eye exams or whatever, donate. Where does that fall in your kind of your picture of CSR?
Yeah. You mentioned one of my roles is I'm the executive director for the Essilor Vision Foundation, right? And that's basically what we do. What we try to do, because it is a corporate foundation, so we're trying to leverage this nonprofit and charity aspect of giving back. But what we've found is that it's not the willingness that's stopping most ECPs to get engaged. it's the complexity of it, and the thought that, how do I manage continuity of care in a nonprofit? I'm going to go there, or I fly in, but then, is my college going to come back on me because I didn't go back afterwards? So am I getting into something I won't be able to get out of? And then I don't have the equipment, and the equipment I have in my office, I'm not really comfortable bringing it into a community place where I don't know who's going to touch them. They're pretty sensitive, they're expensive. And then the dispensing part, like my lab, my system won't be linked to it. So how am I going to go back a week after or 2 weeks to figure this? So it's all of this mess of activities that are operational that are in the way for most people. Mm-hmm. And when you have the right partners that can take away those elements that, and that's what we're trying to build. I mean, we can't scale this across Canada on super quickly. But that's the idea, is you are great at your job. So why don't we take all of the hassle of logistical aspects, take that away, and you just have to show up, do the exams. The filing is managed. You will keep access to it. The way we usually work is we have a local operator, and then we have a nonprofit. The nonprofit is used to give access to a low income or less fortunate community, if I could say. And then we have an operator. Sometimes they're an optician, sometimes there's an optometrist behind it, and they manage the operational aspect of it. One of the models that we used is our foundation owns the equipment that we lend to that organization. Others, we Access Medical is part of the Essilor family. It's not a big secret in there, but so they're kind enough. They're often lending us great equipment. For example, we did a project where we lent a lot of equipment in Nanaimo. So we did some cool project there, trying to test out different technology, because we know that if we want to reach everyone in Canada, teleoptometry would be pretty sweet, right? Mm-hmm. And we know that regulation, we're not the ones that are going to start that, but we're probably going to provide the hardware and maybe the software to do it. So, right. And moving the agenda forward is going to be a key element. And that's where we're talking to universities as well. They're the ones that are going to define protocols, talk to colleges and figure that out. We're not, but what can we do as a platform to help them do it? So I think that's where volunteering is sometimes easy, sometimes complicated. If you're lucky enough that it already exists in your neighborhood and you have a nonprofit that just approaches you, sometimes if you raise your hand, you say, I'm an optometrist, I want to volunteer. Honestly, you'll get people that are going to figure it out.
100%. Well, I think that's, so I'm going to do a little shameless self-promotion here in a second. I mean, I'm shameless about it, but to touch on what you're saying, I think that's pretty cool what you're saying there. If I understand it right, you are basically setting the framework for optometrists to just basically plug and play, right? You're right. Most of us just want the opportunity to give back. We just don't know how. The willingness is usually there, but like, it seems like so much effort to figure it all out. So it would be extremely helpful to know, okay, well, Essilor may be putting on a clinic somewhere and I can volunteer and jump in and participate, and that's it. And I've done my duty and I've given back and I've used my skill set to help somebody else. I think that's great. That's extremely helpful. And the shameless self-promotion is, I, as you mentioned, did a clinic recently. I'm on the board of this local organization here called the Eyeglasses Project. And that's part of what we're trying to do, is create just locally in Vancouver. We don't have a grand reach here, but we're not trying to be that. We're trying to just do what we can here. But setting up the framework. So, we look up where we're going to hold the clinic, what's going to be the actual location. We reach out to the organizations that will help, that need the help and that we can help and need somebody to provide the service. And then we go recruit the optometrists and get the equipment and set it all up, and then just say, okay, who wants to come and help? So there are organizations, like I know there's going to be others in other cities that do something similar. So if there's anybody out there who's looking to volunteer, like you said, just put your hand up, and I'm sure somebody would, you know, show
So
you
now you know, Simon, Robert, reach out. I actually have a community impact manager that works for me. So go on LinkedIn, find Chris Kelm, Kelm. Reach out to him. We'll figure out some way to help and make a difference. That's what it is. It's starting that discussion. And the way we're doing this, if we can't help, we'll try to find someone that can. And I think if we have that conversation openly, I mean, I've had that conversation with optometric associations, opticians. They're in the same boat. They want to do it, and sometimes it's fear of lack of resource. But I found that in our network, like you just did it with a nonprofit. It works. So and most, even for optometrists, it's volunteering, but usually people do get coverage in some regards. So you can get paid to do that volunteer work, and it still works. Some don't have coverage, and that's okay. That's the volunteer part of things. And some optometrists go into low income schools as well to do those exams in different provinces. That's a high volume business. Helping kids see in low income settings, it's not easy. It's not an easy path to take, but it can be worthwhile for some people, but it's not for everyone, obviously.
Yeah. No. And we definitely don't do it. Like you said, we're not nonprofit, and we're not doing it literally, we're just trying to find a way to just help as many people as we can, in this small way.
Tell me, why did you start that?
So I didn't start it, but I was like the second person involved in it, or second or third. I don't know what to tell you, how to answer why, to be honest, Simon. I'm gonna have to figure that out. I'm asking you so I can figure it out. I'm trying to get answers from you so I can figure it out for myself. What's your why again? Yeah, I think I like that why. I think I might use that why too. I don't know, man. I feel compelled to give back in some capacity. The two things that I find myself drawn to doing is that, service, and then education. So those are hence the platform, and that's kind of the impetus for the podcast, and then the other stuff that I've done. So that's kind of where I look at it.
And it's very similar. Like when groups try to do strategy in business, and then they're all psyched and trying to find the right wording for that strategy, and then the mission element of it, and is that the essence of it? Are you going to really have Satori, the illumination and all of that, because you find the right wording when you just do it and you're on the right path? Yeah. Like I often say right now, I'm on my X, like I'm in a spot where I'm really enjoying myself. I know I'm helping a lot of people. I'm making things happen. This is amazing. The wording of the why, not as important in this,
I'm with you on that one. And I that's how I've always kind of functioned, as well as I'm not so good at, the writing it down and making it sort of official in that sense. I'm just like, I got an idea. What's the next step for me to do? In fact, I just did a podcast, like a solo podcast, like a couple of weeks ago, on like, what's the next right thing? What's the next step, just to get the ball rolling, to move forward. And then like, let's see what happened next. Let's see what happens next. And in fact, in a bit more of a sort of a philosophical, twist on this, like one of my favorite quotes is about that. It's like, just the person who takes action all of a sudden will find a whole bunch of stuff coming their way that they never even realized existed. And it only happened because you started doing it, right? So we start to volunteer in these organizations, and you realize that there's something else out there, another opportunity, and you grow in all these different ways. So I've found that from my personal experience. So that's the way I function now. Somebody gives me an opportunity, I'd like, well, let's just see where it goes. There's
this great other podcast from Tim Ferriss when he did an interview with Derek Sivers. He's the guy that invented or developed CD Baby, one of the first, the barcodes on CDs used to cost, like for the complete numbers, used to cost like $4,000. I'm not sure about the numbers. And he just figured out that if he did an online platform and he bought 8 numbers, but he sold the others for like $25 for one, because most of his musician friends just wanted to do one CD, right? They didn't need like 200 number codes for each product of everything. So he just did that, and he sold it for like $20 million a couple of years later.
Wow.
And after that, he really got involved in many different things and got overwhelmed by all of this. And after a while, he just learned to say, like, either I say, and that's what I got from this, either I say, hell yeah, or I say no. Because it's easy, and you've got kids as well. I have one little one. It's easy to get engrossed in all of these projects and lose track of things. That's one of the reason why that coin and those elements are behind it is, why do I get involved in these things? Am I truly on my path right now, or is this unnecessary?
And kids are the like the best way to get yourself in check. Because I was doing all sorts of things in all sorts of directions, and then when you have kids, you're like, okay, well, if kids are your priority, if your kids are your priority, for everybody's got their own priorities. I'm not going to try and tell you what you should have as your priority, but if that is, then you start to say, okay, well, I start to tell people, I'm like, all right, I have to like look at what's the ROI on this opportunity or this whatever it is now, like, because I'm putting that up against spending time with kids and my kids' development and my kids' experience in life. And so it's got to go, like the value is going to be pretty high in the opportunity now. Whereas in the past, I would just run after every little thing. And don't get me wrong, I think that actually served me well at that time, the fact that I did it. Right. But now I have to be more selective. So I tell people who are younger or who don't have kids, first of all, I'm like, you think you're busy, just wait until you have kids. It's a whole different ballgame. And second, I'm like, just do it now, because you likely won't be able to do it later. Like just chase after those things now. And maybe you do waste a little time, but that's how you learn some of it. But I like that. Either it's hell yeah, or it's nah, I don't think so. And that's a good way of putting it.
And as you mentioned, it's just a good way to measure the ROI. It's either high, or if it's kind of lower, it's a no, and you can focus. And the time you're going to spend on those amazing projects, you're going to have more time on them. They're going to be even better. And I think that's what we need to calculate. Not just the things that we leave behind, is space to think. And I think that is underrated right now. And most people, when you talk to them, they need to be booked from the moment they wake up to the time they go to bed. And that is life right now. And I don't think that's sustainable.
Well, that's how I was pre-COVID. And, COVID was not a good thing. Not going to try to come across like it was, but there are silver linings to all experiences in life. And that was one of them for me, is like, you had to, eventually your calendar was completely empty, right? Because there was, and then you start to fill it back up with work, and then like obviously family's already in there. And then you start to say, well, I don't think I need that thing anymore. I don't think, and I actually, some of the decisions were a little harder where I'm like, I don't think I need that. I really am going to say no to that. And, there's that like fable or whatever, that story of like filling the jar with the rocks. You could fill, you got rocks and pebbles and sand. Like, which one do you put in the jar first? You got to put the big rocks, like the big important things in your life, your family and other things that mean a lot. Then you put the small pebbles, then you fill it with the sand, which is the little stuff, and you can maximize the space. That's what I managed to, I'm working on doing that now as we're coming through COVID. So that was one of the silver linings for me, was to be able to rearrange some of that stuff.
I was lucky enough to learn this younger, because at 30 years old, I became like a manager in my own team, big responsibilities and all of that. My stomach couldn't follow it, right? So it was pretty easy to do. So heartburn, the whole deal behind it. So I had to, my body told me it's not enough. That doesn't work. So you had to figure things out. And I really did a switch in the way I thought about these things. And, making that switch was one of the best thing I ever did. So in that career path, in that organization, I ended up taking over the jobs of, I think, 3 directors in the end.
Wow.
And they were never replaced. I could do their job on top of mine.
Wow.
And that was the philosophy behind it. People were asking me, like, how do you do this? I'm like, oh, I've got staff. I mean, I just empowered them so they can do more. Yeah. They're freer. They're more happy, more engaged, because I just let them do it. And I told them, sky's the limit. Here's the boundary. If you go outside of it, let's just discuss it first. But I would be okay if you breach that boundary, but just talk to me first so we're sure that you're aligned and that there's no pitfalls down the road that you're going to hit. And that was just amazing afterwards. And it freed up my schedule to do more things. And that's one of the things, if you like I mentioned Tim Ferriss, there's another great thing in his 4-Hour Work Week book,
Yeah,
The Deal, right? The Deal, he showcased. Basically, it's a model that he showcased. He says, define what you want to do, eliminate what's not useful, make automatic as many things as possible, the small stuff that you don't really need time to spend on, and liberate yourself to really think through and do things right. So I love, and I was in gambling, so the deal thing was really, what got me in there. So it's really about that. So, and if you look at the way I manage my schedule right now, I try to keep it as empty as possible because that's all the things that I can do. I'm not saying I'm not busy. I'm always overwhelmed with multiple things, but
do you even do anything?
Yeah. But regular meetings with my team, scheduling like hour-long meetings and stuff like that. That's not how I approached it. My team, we meet half an hour Mondays, Monday morning. We go over what's big in the week, like what's gonna happen, what do we need to do, and if there's a need, they call me, and we'll figure it out. And that's why I'm not always engrossed in topics. And when we talk about teleoptometry or myopia or other stuff that is not in my, I don't know these things, but I do need to learn them, or at least some part of it, to help more people. But if I was back to back in half-hour meetings, I couldn't do that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're not talking teleoptometry. We're not talking myopia control. We're not talking about these things that we do clinically day to day. And I deliberately like to avoid those types of conversations on the podcast. I shouldn't say avoid, or limit, not avoid, limit those conversations on the podcast. Because yes, I like to have, guests on who are clinically, clinical experts or whatever topical experts, but the subtitle is entrepreneurship, business, and life. And so I want to kind of hit all of those things. And that's why I like having these conversations. And this is a lot more like a conversation. So I know whoever's listening or watching is going to be like, this just looks like two guys shooting the breeze. Right. But that's kind of the point. That was what I wanted this to be. You have this insane wealth of knowledge. It would be really hard for me to nail down just certain topics. I think if we go into a few of these things, there's going to be multiple takeaways for whoever's listening, and applicable too. I think, if you think about how you can use CSR in your practice, how you can use certain types of management styles, like you're describing here, and, using that, starting with why to figure out why you're doing what you're doing, how you can do things differently, perhaps if things you're currently doing don't align with your why, right? I think these are all things now, even though we have brought them up in conversational ways, that I think, I know I'll be taking away to implement starting tomorrow. There's one last thing. We're getting close to our time limit here, Simon. So the one last thing I wanted to talk to you about as far as like a specific topic was on the negotiation side of things. I know this is something that you're good at. It's part of what you do. There's a few books you even listed on here, the Robert Cialdini Influence and the Dale Carnegie How to Win Friends, and even like the Richard Thaler, like Nudge, all these types of these books out there that are, I've read most of those ones that we've just listed that help you. And it's not about magically convincing somebody to do something. You're not like puppeteering them. You're having a conversation and navigating it and trying to influence it in a way that's going to be beneficial, hopefully for both people in it. So I want to, if you can, that's the last topic I want to touch on here. If you could just tell me a little bit about your thoughts on negotiations and tips and tricks and maybe things like that you can share.
Absolutely. And I think those are great references. The latest one, it's not a new book. It's Getting to Yes. That's a principle behind it is principled negotiation. And I think if you have one element where you want to be better at negotiation, you can dive deeper into that one. It was basically developed by the professors that are teaching at the principal negotiation project at Harvard that teach lawyers how to negotiate, right? So it's pretty advanced, and it's the idea behind it that we're going to disagree on the details if we get into it right away, but in principle, like if I talk do you want to change the world? And we start as broad as that. Okay. Do you want to get involved in your community? Do you think that's important? Yes. Okay. Are you doing it right now? Yes. Okay. Do you have any partners? Like, do you have all the resources that you need? No, you're kind of missing some. Okay. So would you be willing to talk to me about like how we could do it? I didn't tell you I'm going to give you glasses, right? Because then you're like, okay, what do you mean you're going to give me, but what do you want in return behind it? So I brought you through this path of principles to say we agree on all of these elements. Why would we disagree on a detail like Essilor bought clearly a while ago, right? No, but that's the issue. And so
I know I've already expressed my thoughts to you on that.
And that might be enough to say no, but then the power of that tactic, and I told you I'm super transparent about those elements, is that you're kind of gonna go back home and say like, damn, I did agree with all of that. And do I still hold that grudge, or did things change? And then you get into psychology behind it, because you're going to need to justify why you said yes to all of these and no to the last one, right? And that's principled negotiation, and you can work with those elements, and and I think that's what makes a difference. And you can use it in multiple elements. You can use it with your patients, and that are kind of refractive to a solution. They're like, they need it, but they don't really want to. And then you go around saying like, oh, you love reading, right? Yeah, but you get tired at the end of the day. Yeah. Would you like to be less tired at the end of the day? If you have spectacles and, reading glasses and progressives, you can wear them and you won't, your life's going to be improved. And they're like, I really like to read. Yeah, I said yes to all of those elements. Like, so, and you just went on the right path to help them. And you took them where they were, took them by the hand, and did the whole reflection. And you bypassed those biases that they created and these boxes that they're trying to put everything in. And you bypassed them and created something good, something positive behind it. If you do it negatively, it's just going to work once and your reputation is going to be ruined. And I often told my previous bosses and my current one, our president, my reputation is more important to me than my job. Because in my field of work, if I lose my reputation, I'm not credible anymore. I'm better off like switch off and do something else. So that's one thing in those negotiation tactics. If you're trying to do it for the wrong reasons, it's not going to work. It's going to work once, twice, if you're lucky, 3 times, but it's going to get, especially in eye care, the eye care profession, it's going to be known. Everyone's going to talk about it, and you're going to be done. Yeah. So it's really, really tricky. So I think principal negotiation is a big one. And if you get into behavioral sciences and what we call nudge, or thinking fast and slow, and the different elements of how our minds work, that is a whole conversation that we could have. And I think that's fascinating. The biases that we have, you can make the relations with the movie The Matrix. We're living in a matrix of human biases that we've built over years. And if you can unravel some of them through these techniques, I think it just simplifies life, and it makes it easier to find a path so that people can work together. And that's what create those strategic partnerships that we talked about.
Yeah, I like that. That's pretty cool when you put it out like that. That principal negotiation. I remember something in Cialdini's book about that. When you get somebody to say yes to something, they defend that position. They don't want to switch over to say they don't want to contradict themselves, right? So when you get them to say yes along a few things, and then all of a sudden you ask a question, they want to say no, but they're like, oh wait, I said yes to all those other things. I have to say yes to this thing now.
Yeah.
But it also reminds me of the Socratic method of like of like debating, right? It's like you're not going
Rhetoric.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're getting people to kind of agree on the bigger things. Like, do you agree that this should be this way? And I like that. That's pretty cool. Um, on the note of nudge, it's so funny because I read that book years ago and I did my own. One of the things I liked from that book, I decided to take and try to like implement in my world. It didn't work
Mhm.
quite as well as it did in the book, but there was something where they did an experiment with university students or something in the class, and they asked them, all they did was ask them a question about, like, I don't know, exercise or something. Did you exercise this week? And then they didn't say you should, you shouldn't. They just asked. And then, like, as the weeks went on, they saw that more and more of them, I think it was exercise, it might have been something else.
Yeah.
More and more of them were exercising or doing the thing
Yeah.
that they were trying to get them to do simply by bringing it to the forefront. So
And
I
there's,
literally,
yeah,
Simon,
go ahead.
so we have, WhatsApp group with, I have a lot of cousins, first cousins. I have a big family. And so a WhatsApp group with a bunch of my cousins, I started doing that. I would just ask them once a week, hey, just quickly tell me, how many times did you guys work out this week? And they would, 2, 3, 4, whatever. And I started to make a graph. People know I'm nerdy, but like, I don't know if you know this nerdy. And yeah, I saw it. Like, I did it for about a couple of months and they started to kind of figure out what I was trying to do, but nobody fought back. They would just give me the answer.
Yeah.
And you could see a little bit of a trend heading in the right direction. I thought that was kind of cool, actually. So.
And that the latest research shows that there's a due date on nudge because people figure them out, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's another great example of a nudge in the marketing sense is they did this test with tomato soup, right? It was usually 99 cents, and now there's an amazing rebate. It's 79 cents. And that, on average, that promotion worked for, like, instead of purchasing 3, you purchased maybe 5 in that. And then what they did is they kept the same promotion, but they added a sign that says limit of 12 per customer. Nothing else, right? And it went from 5 to 9
Oh, wow.
on average purchase per customer. So that's a nudge. We all lived it. I mean, you probably, we went, oh my God, I'm going to, the fear of missing out.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to take them. There's this rebate and there's a limit to it. So I have to stock on tomato soup.
Yeah.
Create
scarcity.
Those are, and I think in we were talking about eradicating provision. I think those behavioral traits, we need to work on those because, we did these major campaigns. And I love the new video you did with BCDO. I think that is great. And it's full of those elements of storytelling it's sweet. So that is perfect. And I think those new type of communications is what the eye health sector needs to get more people into optometric offices so they get their eyes checked. From our own surveys, 6% of Canadians are uncorrected. That's 2.2 million Canadians who squint and don't see well, and kids, it's often even worse than that,
Yeah. I mean, the estimates are a lot higher, right? So, I mean, there's numbers that we kind of throw around. They probably need to be updated, but we know 1 in 4 kids need vision correction.
Yeah.
And a good percentage of that don't even know, right? And so that's why we're talking to parents about that constantly. And that was obviously the impetus for that video, which I was so excited to be part of. And I'm so proud of how BCDO put it together. They did such a great job.
Congrats to them for having you because you're really navigating that video really well.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Simon. Thank you. All right, man. I literally could talk to you for hours, but I got to get home to dinner with the kids and the wife. But before I do that, there's 2 questions I ask at the end of every podcast, which I would like to pose to you now as we lead to the end of the podcast here. So the first is, if we could hop in a time machine and go back to a point in your life that was challenging, feel free to share that moment if you'd like. But more importantly, I'd like you to tell me, what advice would you give to yourself at that time?
I'm always careful because I love where I am right now, and I'm scared of temporal distortion that could mess things up and not be where I am. Could I be a millionaire because I gave myself great advice? Maybe, but I love where I'm at right now. So honestly, I'd give a pass and say, like, someone else might need it more. because I'm good. I did have some issues, and I talked about my stomach and other elements that I had trouble with, employee situations that couldn't work out. I was trying my best to be the friendliest boss ever. It didn't work out. Tried other things. That was really hard for me, but I learned a lot from it. And that quote where what was who said that? I never lose. I either win or I learn.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's Nelson Mandela. I think it was attributed to that quote for me is just amazing. So you don't lose, you learn. So that's where I would go with that question.
I like that. And I like sort of the indirect reference to, I don't know if you've seen the movie, The Butterfly Effect, but it kind of reminds me of that a little bit. So, all right. I appreciate that, that you handled that in a different way. Most people will give me some answer, but I like that you wouldn't change it because you like where you're at now. I think that's really important as well. So the final question then is, everything that you've accomplished to this point, including building your own house, how much of it would you say is due to luck and how much is due to hard work?
I worked in gambling for a long time. So I know luck is part of things. I think, people thought I had multiple lives simultaneously at one point because, I was managing one of the biggest sponsorship budget in Quebec, spending multiple evenings away from home, always super active on LinkedIn, Twitter, reading, sharing documents, all of those books I mentioned. People are like training, all of that. So I think people wondered how I was going to do it. So I can't say hard work is not a big part of it, but I think at some point, trust in everything, and I think luck kind of happens. Let's say the probability of winning are higher for people that work hard. So that's my old gambling life.
I like that. Bring the gambling aspect in there. I like that the probabilities are higher. That's good. That's good. So the probability of winning is higher for those who work hard. I like that. That's good. That's it's kind of like counting cards in a way. That's kind of working hard, right?
I told you I can't talk about those tricks, right? I'm not allowed to.
We're gonna do that in the next episode of the podcast.
Okay.
It's funny. I like that. That's great answer, and thank you for that. Again, sometimes guests will give me sort of a percentage or whatever, but I know that it's a mix, it's a blend, and it's sometimes hard to separate the two things. When you mentioned the win or learn quote, I quickly Googled it on the side here. So from what I can see quickly here, Nelson Mandela is who it's attributed to. But in case you're interested, it's also Win or Learn is the name of Conor McGregor's book. So if you're into MMA, that might be something you want to look into.
All right.
Awesome, man. Okay, Simon, any last words of wisdom you'd like to impart on us before we leave this conversation?
No, click like, share this man's podcast. I think he's doing a tremendous service for the optometric community and the eye care community. So congrats, Javier. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. I think that's a perfect way to close out the podcast. Thank you, Simon. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who's listening and watching. See you guys in the next episode.